Welcome back, everyone, to Meditations by Gregory T. Obert, bringing you the best new guided meditations and mental health discussions every week. I'm your host, Dr. Gregory T. Obert, clinical psychologist. Thank you so much for joining me today. All right, so I keep using the term anxiety, but what do I mean when I say anxiety? So specifically, I view anxiety as a future-oriented mood state involving excessive fear or worry that's out of proportion to the actual threat. And this often manifests in physical ways like a rapid heartbeat or sweating, emotional ways like dread, and behavioral ways like avoidance. And you may have heard of the term panic attacks, just to kind of clarify what that is. They used to be called anxiety attacks. Well, I don't know if they used to be, but certainly kind of in common language, I hear that a lot. Oh, it's an anxiety attack. Well, in the business, we tend to call them panic attacks. And this is where a sudden, intense fear just spikes in you within minutes. Think about your heart rate increasing. Think about your temperature shooting up. Think about trouble breathing, as well as chronic worry that these panic attacks are going to keep coming up. Typically, people that have panic attacks describe them as horrific. They say it feels like they're having a heart attack. They're not. Their heart's fine, yet they're just overwhelmed by this sudden spike in anxiety. If you have sought help for anxiety in the past, or even if you sought help for other mental health conditions, you've probably come across a measure called the GAD-7. It's called the Generalized Anxiety Disorder 7. And it's a measure that just gives people a quick, providers really, a quick look into maybe we're dealing with some anxiety here. Okay, so let me ask you the questions. There's only 7 questions on this measure. Over the last 2 weeks, have you been bothered by the following? 0 to 3, 3 being the most bothered. Feeling nervous, anxious, or on edge. Not being able to stop or control worrying. Worrying too much about different things. Trouble relaxing. Being so restless it's hard to sit still. Becoming easily annoyed or irritable. And feeling afraid as if something awful might happen. Now keep in mind, this is a screener. It's not meant to replace an actual mental health provider. It just gives providers a sense of what it is you're dealing with, as well as giving you a sense of what you're dealing with. If you happen to have an elevated score on that, it might be time to take a look into talking to someone about what's going on in your life. Of course, there are other measures out there that take a look at different types of anxiety disorders, but that tends to be the most common one that you're going to see out in the world. So, what, or I should say how, does anxiety develop? What contributes to it? Well, there's a few different things, and in the business we call them risk factors. Typically, it's going to be some kind of interplay between genetics, like family history, biology, like brain chemistry imbalances, overactive parts of the brain, like the amygdala, as well as environmental factors, like trauma, stress, or learned behaviors. Now, if you're more of sort of a psychodynamic, psychoanalytic, Freud type person, you might view anxiety as stemming from unconscious conflicts, repressed emotions, or unresolved childhood issues. And your anxiety is going to be a signal of that inner turmoil. So maybe you believe that, maybe you don't. What are some other theories out there? Well, there's also the behavioral theory. These would be from people like Watson or Skinner. Really, anxiety is learned through conditioning of some sort, whether it's classical with pairing or operant, through reinforcement. In other words, you view anxiety, or you develop anxiety because of something that happened to you repeatedly again and again and again. So let's say you are going to the cafeteria and you get your tray, and when you walk past a certain part of the cafeteria, you slip and you fall and all your food goes everywhere. And of course, everyone starts laughing at you. Well, you've learned that when you slip and fall in the cafeteria, in this particular spot of the cafeteria, maybe the cafeteria as a whole, that bad things are going to happen. So because of that learning, you then maybe don't go to that cafeteria anymore. Or maybe you go to it, but you feel this strong anxiety as you go through it. Now, if you buy into, say, cognitive theory like Beck, he mentions that anxiety develops because of distorted thinking patterns, like catastrophizing or overestimating threats. And this is going to lead to some kind of maladaptive appraisal of the situation. So I guess I just have a lot of school examples on my mind today, but imagine with this test that you go into it, you take it, and it comes back and you failed it. You go, wow, I failed this test. I'm a failure of a person. Now, that's not necessarily true, yet because of anxiety whispering its sweet nothings in your ear like a siren, well, you're going to believe that maladaptive appraisal of the situation. And of course, if you have someone like Carl Rogers, client-centered therapy, he would say that anxiety is developing because you're not allowed to be who you actually are. You have all these conditions of worth placed upon you, and because of that, you can't be the person that you want to be, because we all seek approval, right? And so I know that if I allow myself to be who I am, you may not love me, you may not care about me. So I'm going to kind of keep that in check, that part of me that really, honestly, deep down, I want to show the world. And when I do that, there's going to be a conflict, right? And so because of this conflict going on internally, that's going to lead to some kind of anxiety. There's also going to be a little bit of what's called exposure therapy. So this is where you gradually start to face your fears. So what is exposure therapy all about? Well, the idea is that the more that you do something, over time, the less anxiety you start to feel. And we know this intuitively. So think back, if you're old enough to be driving, think back to the first time you got behind the wheel of a car. How anxious were you? Well, you can't tell me, but I imagine you were pretty anxious. I know for myself, I was quite anxious, because I'm getting in the driver's side, and I got to figure out where the steering wheel needs to go, the height of it, right where my hands go, the mirrors. I got to figure out where the seat is supposed to be so it feels comfortable. I got to adjust everything. There's a lot to keep in mind. So of course, anxiety's high. Now when I get behind the wheel of a car, after having done it for decades, well, it's no problem. I just get in, I adjust my stuff, and I go. And I imagine the same is true for you. So through exposure therapy, we begin to expose ourselves to situations that are causing us anxiety. And over time, we start to habituate to them. That's your $10 psychology word. In other words, we get used to them.